to the Scrutiny Performance Panel for Education for our November meeting. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Only one, Miles Langstone.
Great, thanks. Could I welcome Martin Franklin and Alison Crabb, the head and the chair of governors for Morriston Comprehensive School. Very pleased to that you were able to join us today, so thank you very much. And I can see in the wings we've got Helen Morgan-Rees and Robert Smith, the cabinet member, so welcome to them as well. Are there any disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests? Silence, I hope, means no. That's good.
Can I just mention myself?
Sue?
I'm at school in Swansea, but not this school.
Oh, I think you won't need to declare unless it's directly related. So if it's mentioned, your school is mentioned, then we'll declare them.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
The next thing is the minutes. They've been circulated, and can I have a proposer that they are a true record? Mike Day, a seconder. Steve Gallagher, Councillor Steve Gallagher. On the letters, any comments on those? No, at this rate, we're going through the agenda very fast. Public questions, and I understand there are none. So,
no public questions today.
We go straight on to the section of the school scrutiny session with Morriston Comprehensive School. As I say, big welcome to Martin and to Alison for taking the time to come along and join us today to talk about your experience in the school and what you've been doing and so on. Could I say, I was looking at the slides you had, Martin, and I think we've got about 20 minutes really for that. We want to go into questions, and I think you had about 50 slides, but if you could bring out the main points in those slides, that would be fantastic, because we would like the opportunity to just ask a few questions, and very often with that two-way exchange you learn a lot more than you do in any other way. So thanks for that. And could I hand over to you? Are you coming in first, Martin, or is it do you want Alison to come in?
I think I'll come in first. Alison, is that okay with you, or?
Well, that's absolutely fine, Martin. Yes, I just be sort of echoing everything Martin says anyway, so that's absolutely fine.
Thanks. I think you want to share the screen, do you?
I will, if I could, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, is everyone able to see the screen?
I can. Everybody else okay? Thumbs up, yes. I think it's okay. Okay,
lovely. First of all, yeah, just thank you for the opportunity to come along today and obviously tell you about our sort of, we try to avoid the word journey, but sort of our sort of progress really since the Estin inspection back in February 2020. Obviously a lot has happened since 2020, but I just want to give you a flavour of what we've done. Obviously there are 5 recommendations. My presentation obviously addresses each of those 5 recommendations. If you wanted me to stop after a recommendation, you wanted to ask some questions, Chair, I'm obviously happy to go along with whatever you want me to do, really.
Oh, well, you kick off first, and if people want to come in, they'll put their hands up, and okay. We'll come in. But thank you. Yeah, great.
Okay. Apologies for using any anachronisms, so please ask if I'm saying something, but I'll try and explain. Obviously, the 5 recommendations that Estin came back with are listed there on the screen. We had the inspection report in its final draft in April 2020, by which time we'd obviously gone into lockdown as well, which sort of added to the the complications really. But our first protocol was about, we produced a post-inspection action plan, which was going to obviously address each of those recommendations, and that really has underpinned our sort of school improvement, and is important that this is implemented by all our staff. In terms of actually producing the action plan, it involved all our teaching staff, our non-teaching staff, the governing body, and our local, our LA challenge advisor, Nigel Jones, as well, in terms of formulating this action plan. And several drafts were obviously produced before the final version that was shared with Helen as Director of Education as well. It was put out to consultation with the staff, as I said, and it came as it was ratified in the summer term of 2020. It is a working document. It has evolved, it's evaluated, it's been modified throughout the process as well. Obviously, when we had the recommendations, lockdown had only just began, and we didn't know where that was going to go. So obviously that's influenced our work as well. The progress has been monitored every half term at an accelerated improvement board meeting. That's that we run in school. It involves the challenge advisor. It involves the chair governors, and it involves members of the governing body as well. And I know that minutes of each of those meetings is shared with the head of secondary school improvement and the director as well. We meet every half term. They are robust, they are challenging. And Nigel ensures that, and that's been really effective, I think, in moving us forward as well. We've tried to encourage and use members of the leadership team, department leaders and teaching staff who have periodically contributed to those AIB meetings. And I think that's important because it reflects the work that's going on across the school rather than just at senior leadership level. We then have monitored progress against our PIAP, our post-inspection plan, and we RAG rate that as well. And we've done that termly, and we've also, probably the most important thing is we produced impact statements. Obviously, I think sometimes it's being aware of the fact it's not just about putting strategies in place, it's trying to measure what the impact of those strategies has been. And I think that's really important, and it's something that I think we've done quite effectively. In terms of evidence, we are constantly updating electronic evidence folders under each of those recommendations. So if you did come to school and you said, okay, show me the evidence for R1 or R2, we would be able to show you a considerable bank of evidence that we've collated throughout the year as well. And again, that's something that's run at department level as well, and I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, departments, obviously it's important that all the school is addressing those recommendations, not just the leadership team. Each department produces something called a department improvement plan. We'll call it DIP. And they are addressing 3 of the recommendations that are applicable to departments, R1, R2 and R5. So teaching and assessment, skills, and improving standards and progress in lessons. Again, the progress from those meetings are reviewed regularly throughout the year. And again, they produce impact progress reports as well. The minutes of those meetings are shared with their line managers, and obviously they're asked to contribute periodically to different AIB meetings as well. All the departments also have electronic evidence folders under each of those 3 recommendations, and again they have collated evidence as they've gone along. So for instance, examples of pupils' work that they've taken images of or they've scanned, etc., documentation, other types of evidence, some oral presentations in English, for instance, etc., and they've kept those in an electronic form, again as evidence for Estin as well, if for the revisit. And also, this is evidence through departmental self-evaluation meetings, which I held in October, with each of the department leaders as well. So there's a various sort of ways of triangulating the evidence that we're collating and making sure that we're making progress against each of those recommendations. And I think that triangulation is really important to stress, really. As I said, it's something that's happening throughout the school as well. Okay, pastoral leaders, we've got heads of year, what we call progress leaders. They are also addressing the recommendations. They address different ones. They address R3, which is about pupils' behaviour and attitudes to learning. And they're also looking at strengthening quality and impact of leadership in the pastoral sector as well. And they produce year improvement plans. Again, they're RAG rated, they produce progress reports, and again, they are collating evidence as well in a similar way to departments. And again, that's monitored by our assistant head teacher who's in charge of wellbeing, and she monitors that again regularly throughout the year as well. Okay, how are staff addressing the recommendations? Well, we created 6 action groups in September 2020, or in the summer prior to September 2020. On some of the titles of which are on the top there, which addressed elements of the recommendations. We thought that it was really important. We were looking at obviously pupil standards and progress, attitudes to learning, how we would improve in teaching. We broke teaching and assessment up because we thought they were 2 different things really that we would like to focus on. And we also looked at skills development, and we also added as a 6th one, improving planning for curriculum for Wales for what was 2022, and I'm sure you'll come back to questions about that a little bit later on. The action groups have been created. We created calendar time on our meeting schedule. So once every month, there's a action group meeting. Those action groups are led by teaching staff. We don't lead that as a leadership team, although a member of the leadership team is attached to an action group. They don't chair that meeting. I think that's another important factor. We allocated budgets. So for the action groups to release staff for work on projects or to visit other schools, obviously that's been nigh on impossible over this period, but the money was, we created a budget for that. And the groups are expected and have shared and disseminated regularly to all staff as well. And we've ensured that there's a spread of people in each of those groups from the different areas of the school as well. So again, they're taking that information back to departments and to areas of learning as well. Okay, July 2021, I'll just talk about just the review really and the next step from the post-inspection action plan 1, which we completed, or we came to its, I think it came to a sort of sensible end back in July. The July AIB addressed the overall progress of that 1-year action plan. That was attended again by Nigel and by also Rob Davis as the secondary head of school improvement, and the feedback from that was positive in terms of the progress we've made in the school. We've reviewed and the roles and responsibilities of the senior leadership team. That's been amended for 2021, again, to fully reflect the priorities of the school and also the changes in the leadership team. And over the summer, we drew up what we've called PIAP 2, which I have forwarded today, and I didn't expect people to read, but I felt it was useful for you to have a copy of, which builds on and develops the work from the PIAP 1. Again, this was put out to consultation with staff and to governors, and also shared with the local authority and Nigel as well. As I said, it builds and develops the work of the original post-inspection action plan, it's important, I think, to mention that the first inspection action plan was adapted to reflect COVID lockdown, and also the school's approach to address the recommendations for 2 things really, was looking at how, in terms of obviously teaching, assessment and progress, we were looking at how we were providing for blended learning when the children were in lockdown, and also how we were addressing the improvements we were trying to look at in terms of face-to-face teaching as well. Okay, I'm not going to go through this in detail as you've said, okay, but I just want to give you a flavour really, and I think the document I forwarded a few days ago sort of gives you a detailed picture really of a timeline that we had. Just a couple of points really. As I said, we felt it was important once we'd gone into lockdown, we wanted effective teaching to continue. We only had a 3-day notice really before we went into lockdown, and we decided that we would continue with the methods that staff were using at the time. So they were using a variety of different approaches. They were using things like Microsoft Teams, they were using SharePoint, they were using Google Classrooms. And rather than say we're going to use Teams and not use the others, we felt that wasn't possible at that particular point. So at the time we were running different platforms to deliver work to children. But at least we felt it was a way of actually getting that up and running and building confidence and trying to reassure our staff. Staff were provided with a laptop so they could work from home during lockdown to provide the lessons and didn't need to obviously come onto site in terms of travelling, etc. And we also focused on two things in terms of teaching. We were using Rosenshine's Principles in Action, which is a piece of work and an accompanying book that we felt was really applicable to distance learning and developing questioning, etc. And also using we're a pivotal school, and we were using the book, Where Adults Change, Everything Changes, which focuses on developing and improving attitudes to learning, which again is obviously one of the priorities for Estin as well. Okay, moving on to the autumn term, we carried out some feedback from parents and from pupils, and from this it influenced our decision to move to Microsoft Teams as our single platform for blended learning. We provided a great deal of support for staff in terms of training, inset days, twilights, etc., in order to develop our blended learning. We were very much a mixed ability group as staff in terms of their expertise in terms of blended learning. So we focused on Microsoft Teams, and we used that, and we identified staff who were particularly strong in using Microsoft Teams, and they led some training. We gained some training from the local authority, and again it was about building confidence for staff as well. In the period when we were back in school after September, we use something called learning walks, where all the leadership team walk the school every lesson. We're all attached to one lesson. Usually it was once every day, and now it's a little bit longer. Now we've got more capacity, and we were able to use that as a way of looking, and we were finding that were great incidences, for instance, of direct teaching instruction, of modelling, of targeted questioning. I think that was a really good way that there's a member of staff going into every class, every lesson of the day, and I think it's great presence for us, but it's also a great way of looking at what the teaching and the instruction is going on in the lesson as well. And also, I think it's led to increased pupil engagement, and it's certainly reduced behaviour incidents in many areas. Okay, spring term, again, I'm not going to talk a great deal, but mention the fact again, we're carrying out parental surveys regarding live lessons, which were being rolled out, particularly at Key Stage 4. Parents and pupils certainly helped us evaluate this provision. It was really effective. The feedback was broadly positive, and we acted upon some of the negatives, which I think was really important. And again, as I said, we use confident staff to sort of share some good practice, particularly in things, for instance, our Head of English ran a session on using successful marking on Teams. Our Head of Science used something called the Whack-On boards, which are sort of an interactive boards that the children were actually writing on and communicating in live lessons as well. Again, just the impact really from that. I just sort of draw on a couple of points. Certainly in lockdown, but by the time we came to lockdown 2, nearly all staff now delivered live lessons through Teams, which was a huge step forward. Certainly the quality of formative comment and pupil improvement was really important, looking at something called DIRT time, or directed individual response time we were developing, and improvements in sort of annual professional development through performance management, where we were seeing a more professional inquiry. And again, I'm sure you'll come back to that a little bit later as well. Okay, the summer term, obviously, of 2021, we've focused, when we came back, was very much about focusing on our preparation for GCSE and A-level centre determined grades. We decided that we would remove all calendar meetings and just devote all our time to that. Again, I think it was a case of supporting our staff and our children, particularly our GCSE and A-level pupils, who needed a great deal of support when they came back in the summer term last year. We use something called Accelerated Reader to measure progress in terms of reading. And then what we definitely found was the children who continued to engage in Accelerated Reader made some quite significant gains over lockdown. And it was quite clear that obviously the children who hadn't engaged as well, they had begun to fall behind. And that has influenced some appointments we've made in terms of learning coaches and intervention TAs that we've put into place for September. We appointed a new assistant head teacher, who was Dr. Sam Williams from St Tylo's. He's taken over responsibility for teaching and learning skills and curriculum for Wales. And I'll talk a little bit more about how he's developed what teaching and assessment is going to look like moving forward in Morriston as well. Okay, the PIAP 2 was produced last summer. And some of the points there again, I think, which link to what we've said. I think Sam and I both met and we agreed how we would try to align really curriculum for Wales, our teaching and learning sort of vision for Morriston and our skills agenda aligned under one whole school vision. And that's been very much the work since we've come back for this term as well, to build on some of the practice from last year as well. Okay, we've launched something this year called the Big Six, and this is what we want all our lessons in Morriston to have. And you know, it's not rocket science, I'm sure, for anyone, any practicing teachers here, that we are looking and focusing on 6 big things. We're talking about challenge, making sure we have challenging lessons, independence, obviously relationships, engagement, responsive teaching, and skills. And those are the 6 things that we are now making sure that we're building into every single lesson in Morriston, whether it's a PE lesson, whether it's a French lesson, whether it's a science lesson, where we're focusing on that. Now, those things will look very different in different subject areas as well. And that's a job of work that's going on at present. And the departments have already begun to address how the Big Six will look in their subject areas as well. Okay, as I said, it's utilising the language of the Big Six as well. And in terms of how are we measuring that? Well, we've started something that we couldn't do last year. We were constrained by, I think, was obviously lesson observations. This year we have run and are presently running Estin style 15-minute observations. Which are carried on, which are followed up by a 30-minute follow-up conversation between the interviewee and the interviewer as well. And we're using that evidence to begin to build up a picture again of evidence for Estin as well, but more importantly for ourselves moving forward. We're looking under 3 things. We're not looking at identifying whether things are, you know, good or adequate or excellent. We're looking at things like if things are being from beginning, developing, embedding and leading. And that, I think, develops a conversation with staff, which I think is really important, rather than trying to put a badge on everything as well. And Sam is already then calculating where we are in terms of that, identifying what the average is, where we're strong at, where we feel we need areas for development as well. And that work is ongoing, and that will be completed prior to the Estin virtual revisit, which we think is has been scheduled for early in December. Okay, just run through R2, which is to do about development of skills. We have 3 skills coordinators in school, someone who was looking over literacy, of numeracy and the DCF. They have done full audits of skills across the curriculum. They've done that through meetings with department leaders. In the summer term of 2020, again, they were holding meetings with department leaders and getting a full picture. They were mapping and tracking systems put into place in order to identify where we were particularly strong in skills and how skills would be being delivered across different subject areas as well. They've set up a tracking sheet which is on SIMS, which is the package we use as a registration and an assessment tool. And each skills coordinator has begun to create a skills portfolio of evidence as well, which sort of builds up a picture of what skills in, for instance, literacy looks like across the school in different areas with different age groups as well. I'll just run through, I appreciate the time, just one or two other things. As I said, I've mentioned about how we're using accelerated reader to baseline data, and that is tracked at different points during the year, so we're able to track children's progress. And I've already mentioned about the gains we made during lockdown as well. And in terms of some of the work that Sam is doing, if I just run on very quickly, just to give you a flavour, one thing that we are really keen to begin to develop is when we start talking about literacy, what we're trying to avoid, and particularly numeracy, I suppose, is that we're not trying to bolt it on to a lesson and it becomes like a sort of an add-on and you wonder exactly what is the real gain. What we're trying to do is to make sure that it's a cohesive part of each lesson as well. And we're using things like strategies to encourage the use of every lesson literacy. So we're using some of the skills that are used in English so we can use them across the board. Things like making sure that we write in full sentences, getting the children to reflect on their work, getting the children to read to understand, getting them to check obviously spelling and also use of best vocabulary. And there's some examples there of how we're using that in order to sort of move the agenda forward. I think it's particularly important in things like literacy. So for instance, even in like a history lesson, if there is something that's got a numeracy sort of bias to it, it's more about using the language. It's doing things like breaking down tasks into small steps, using things like predict and check, looking for patterns, relationships, estimation and approximation, and also how we identify relevant information. And I think that's something that we're keen to develop now, where those sort of is the language of numeracy and the language of literacy as well across different subject areas as well. Okay, I'll just go through R3 very quickly, but it's about attitudes to learning. Clearly, it's about improving pupils' behaviour, and attitudes to learning is something I think we've put a huge amount of time and effort into. We've created something called attitudes to learning statements. These have replaced what we've previously used as effort levels, and perhaps I'll explain that a little bit more on the following slide. So basically, we're trying to identify in each lesson, in each subject rather, how children's attitudes to learning. So for instance, when we do assessments, we're also assessing how the children, what we're rating their attitudes to learning. And it's also giving those children some idea of what that really means. And I think we've moved away from saying, oh, your effort is excellent or your effort is good, because it doesn't mean anything. What we're trying to say is, if I'm an engaged learner, those are the sort of things, those are the sort of the behaviours that you would demonstrate to be an engaged learner. If you're a passive learner, you're identifying some of these traits. And these have been really important in conversations with children to make sure that they're actually understanding, well, okay, in order to make progress, what do I need to do in terms of my attitudes to learning, which will impact upon my attainment? And I think those two things are really, really important moving forward. And they are something that's worked really well for us. They're on interim reports that go out every 8 to 10 weeks. The staff are now familiar with them as well, so are the children, more importantly, and so are the parents. We use them as part of our Ready to Learn intervention. I'll talk about that in a second if I get a chance. And then we also use them for linking progress to effort and attitude as well. And I think those are really important. And then we use the ATL scores are used by heads of year, our progress leaders, to track and monitor engagement throughout the year as well. So for instance, if a pupil begins to become passive, whereas they've been engaged for a period of time, then that obviously flags up really quickly, and we're able to begin to address some of the issues that has caused as well. And this has made a real big difference to us moving the school forward. We've also looked at developing learner voice, and I think that's something that we weren't as effective in previously, and I think that is important. So the lights are going out in my room. We have raised the profile of the Pupil Leadership team, who are elected members of a pupil team that work with 2 members of staff that lead on that, not SLT, 2 members of teaching staff. And we're using that for a variety of things. You know, some of it is pretty obvious. We're looking at that they've influenced our school uniform. They've actually been involved in creating these ATL statements. They were involved in some of our COVID and health and safety measures that we introduced during lockdown. And they've also been involved in things like, obviously, you know, LGBT, etc. And they've had a strong say in how we're moving the school forward in terms of things like this as well. They've ensured, obviously, they've worked alongside the Curriculum for Wales champions to develop a new curriculum, and they've been involved in identifying some parts linked to the 4 core purposes. And we've ensured that has sort of been spread right across the school. So we've got form captains, we've got year group councils, and we've also got smaller groups that work on other sorts of groups as well, linked to things like the Eco Club, etc. And all these things play into one another as well. And I think that's really important, how all these elements are coming forward. They're also influenced, for instance, how they've been used, their results, to create assemblies. And also trying to make sure that the children begin to really feel part of the school and be part of the decision-making process as well, which is absolutely important to us moving forward. As I said, learner voice, 2 things really that we're looking at here is how we use learner voice in lessons and curriculum areas. We use them in terms of departmental reviews, where we ask the children questions. The departments use them to affect work and how that moves forward. Interesting conversations as part of my self-evaluation meetings with heads of department, for instance, head of art who uses it, for instance, even in terms of, for instance, she's now doing less painting with certain groups of year 9 because they wanted to do more pottery, etc. And she's actually made changes, really not sort of, 2 years in advance, but actually influencing what she's doing in the next couple of weeks as well. And that has been really effective in terms of children's engagement in those sort of lessons as well. And how we're also using it in terms of developing work for the environment, the community, and pupil well-being as well. These things are really important to us as well. And also building on things like our sixth form council, which was already established, but again is be more of an integral part of the school moving forward as well. Okay, just run through very briefly. Obviously, some of this is already in the past in terms of what we did in terms of supporting learners during lockdown. We, like lots of schools, had many challenges, I think, in terms of making sure that we were engaging with children during lockdown. A lot of our children really struggled during lockdown, and we felt it was really important that we form tutors held 2 15-minute sessions every week on a Tuesday and a Thursday, where it was a chance for them just to touch base with the pupils, just for them to see their friends, just do basic things, quizzes, little things they were doing, just as a way of actually helping and supporting them, particularly with their mental well-being, which I think was a big thing for us moving forward. We identified our vulnerable learners, obviously through the county system on the red list, but we also identified other pupils that were vulnerable as well, that didn't hit the criteria for that red list, but pupils who we were particularly concerned with. And our teaching assistants and our pastoral team have been excellent in working with those vulnerable learners in terms of phone calls home, just touching base with the parents. Some of the parents were going through some difficult times as well with the children, and I think that has been a real worthwhile thing, and it's something we've continued when we came out of lockdown as well, to get that communication with the parents. And then, what we did in terms of children who weren't engaging with blended learning, we provided laptops, we provided Wi-Fi vouchers, and obviously massive support from the county in terms of that, which was really, really helpful. And obviously, if those barriers couldn't be removed, we actually invited those children into school as well. And I think that was an important part as well. For some, it was just actually coming in and actually being with a member of staff was absolutely vital for their well-being. We did a number of things that we acted upon. Pupil Voice, for instance, identified the need that some of the children were getting overwhelmed with the amount of work, and we had a sort of what we call a pause, reflect, and reset day, where it was a day where they could just catch up on work that they were struggling to get completed in the time that we were given. And I think we were aware of the fact we were walking a line between some parents saying, well, you're not setting enough work, and then other parents saying you're setting too much work. And I think we were quite sort of flexible in terms of what we were doing in terms of that. Okay, R3, some of the things that we're doing in terms of promoting positive behaviours. We've got a Pupil of the Week board where each department identifies a pupil every week. We use recognition boards in every classroom, so staff are writing names down of children who are doing particularly well. Obviously, we send things like postcards and we also do phone calls home. And I think that is one thing that I would say that I've underestimated quite how powerful a phone call home is. Even for, I teach a few construction lessons, phoning up to some of my construction boys who are in year 10 or in year 11, you're thinking that's not going to, they absolutely love the fact that someone has taken the time to phone home and say that they're doing particularly well in your subject. It's massive, really, moving forward. What we've done, obviously, we've put some capacity into the system in terms of things like well-being officers. There's now a well-being officer and a progress leader, obviously, for each year, and those follow the children through each year. We've got intervention groups within each year group that the well-being officers run as well, using an emotional literacy toolkit used to support specific learners we've identified. We've got 2 members of staff who are trained Thrive practitioners, working again with hard-to-reach children. We've got an academic tutor that we've put into the 6th form because we felt our 6th form needed support as well, particularly having, once they came out of lockdown, I think we underestimated the effect it had on some of our 6th form children as well in order to support them. And we've used things like the PASS survey, which we've used to identify specific children, and we tried to build confidence and resilience for targeted children there as well. Moving forward, we're a pivotal school. We use something called Pivotal, which is very much a restorative process that we use. We've been able to build upon that by training another 3 members of staff as pivotal trainers. We've run sort of positive behaviour workshops that we run to all new teaching and associate staff as part of our induction process. And again, sort of getting them into what pivotal looks like in Morriston. I think that's really important, what it looks like. And I think as a result, all staff are dealing with issues calmly, consistently, and all seeking, feedback on their approach as well. And I think it's developing that relationship with children is massive for us moving forward as well. We run a mile. We've developed our mile provision, which is an alternative provision for children who struggle to engage with, a normal sort of a subject structure and lesson structure. We've appointed a mile manager, and we've appointed 2 specialist intervention TAs as well. And we're using our EOTIS funding, I think, really effectively now in order to ensure that there are children who would be at the risk of permanent exclusion. They are pupils who would be at the risk of being taken out of mainstream education, and we're working with those children not only in terms of their well-being but also in terms of their academic progress. We've invested significantly in things like Inspire, Military Preparation College, Gower College for different courses as well, some on work experience, in order to try and make sure that we are providing those children with, number one, a future, and number 2, qualifications that will allow them to go into the world and obviously play an important part. And that is just so important, I think, for us moving forward as well. And I think the mile has led to higher levels of engagement, improved attitudes to learning. I think that's been proved by data drops that we've produced. It has reduced our fixed term exclusions, and it's certainly improved attendance with some of those children as well. We've created something called Eirhaven, which is our communication base for children with ASD, with social communication difficulty. We found an increasing number of children are coming to us with ASD, and we've been able to appoint an ASD TA who works specifically with those children. Again, it's been really, really effective. It's improved attendance, as you can see, it's improved attendance for those children by 4.7%, but more importantly, as importantly, it's improved engagement as well. And I think it's fantastic that these kids are actually saying, right, I want to take the work down to the lady that runs it. I want to show her the work, etc. I want to actually, they're proud to show her and have got really developed excellent relationships with her as well. Okay, we've also created a ready to learn room. That is, we've appointed a ready to learn officer and behaviour intervention TA. The idea of that is about regulate, reflect and reset. It's about children who identified maybe low level issues in the class. They're able to come out, they go to the ready to learn room for a period of time, they reflect on what's happened, they sort of reset, and when the ready to learn officer feels, yeah, that child can come back into lessons, they do so. Again, it's something we started in September, and it's already had real positive benefits. I know Nigel has been to school, and we've shared that with him as well. And the feedback from parents, the feedback from the children, and from some of our staff as well has been really positive about the effect it's had. It also runs round into a circle where those members of staff who had the child in the first instance will come and have restorative conversations with the children as well. And I think that's really, really important. And Tom, who's the intervention TA, is then involved in sort of projects with particular hard to reach kids, and he's running different projects with some of those children as well. But it's all about trying to engage them and getting them back into lessons, which is really important. We're part of the RADI project, identifying specific pupils. Some of them are EFSM, but some of them not necessarily all EFSM children that we feel will benefit from being involved in the RADI project, which is a way of us increasing their expectations really of what they can achieve in school. It's a way of hopefully closing the attainment gap. We started it now in year 7, and it's something I think is already beginning to have some good effects for us moving forward as well, and it's something that we're quite excited about. Okay, just touch on very briefly. We've also seconded one of our pastoral team as our family engagement officer. One thing that we felt we were missing was that link with some of our hard to reach families who struggle to engage with the school. They may have had some bad experiences of education themselves, and we are looking at ways that the family engagement officer, and again it's about finding the right person as ever, is about finding someone who is going to create that link between the family and the school. And I think that is something that we're quite really excited to develop really moving forward on 2 levels. One, academic support to support the family in terms of supporting their children with learning, but also supporting them in terms of well-being as well, and particularly in terms of lockdown, that's been massively important as well. And also about supporting the family. So, for instance, we'd like to get to the point where we will invite families into school. They can just come in for, coffee mornings. They will be able to come in. We can support them in completing CVs or applications, or applications for credit. If they need to access, any credit themselves that we can support them with. I'm sure there's lots of ways that we can support some of our hard to reach families as well. So it's about supporting the family, and it's about supporting the child as well. Just running about R4, which is about strengthening leadership across the school. I am wary of going into time, so I don't know if you want me to stop or you would like me to carry on.
if you could highlight the main points, and because I know we've got a few questions that we sent to you. Some of them you will have answered, but others, and people will want to make contributions as well.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, just in terms of strengthening the quality and impact of leadership across the school, obviously, I don't see the need for touching on some of the things from, historically, but over the last, since 2016, we've felt that we'd made some really, good progress, really, in terms of where we were as a school. We understood that before the inspection, 2019, our results fell back against some of the revised learning measures, particularly the CAP 9 and the average point score. But prior to that, we'd always been in the, we'd been in sort of top quartiles for nearly for lots of indicators. We were a yellow school. Our A-level results had improved significantly since 2019. And from where we were, when I came here, we were a red school. We were schools challenge school, etc. And we were below the median in nearly all indicators against similar schools. So we felt that we had made some progress. We had made good progress, rather. There was some context. By 2018, we had a completely new leadership team, which took some, some adjustment in terms of what we were doing. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that we were in a deficit situation in 2018, which we needed to necessitate a recovery plan, which we put into place. We were able to come out of deficit, particularly, we came out within 2 years instead of the 3 years. But I think Estin then, instead of seeing that as a possible, a positive, almost identified that as a negative in terms of, well, you've possibly come out too quickly, and the scope of the savings that you've made has impacted upon your capacity for improvement. So it was a difficult situation in terms of, you almost couldn't win with that sort of with that argument. But we felt that was important, obviously, it's important for me to share that very briefly with you. In terms of where we were, the lead inspector made it very clear that she felt that in terms of the leadership team, that it was unsustainable what we were trying to do in terms of our teaching roles, plus all the responsibilities that we had in terms of moving the school forward. We were able, because of being in a better financial position as well, in order that we reduce the teaching commitment for the leadership team. I was able to bring on members of staff onto an extended leadership team. So I was able to bring on the head of science, head of English, and our elenco. We would be able to put increased capacity into the leadership team, which was really important in terms of when we began to look at producing our post-inspection action plan. And the extended leadership team were given sufficient time in order to fulfill those new roles as well. In terms of leadership across the school, because I think this is important, that when we talk about leadership, I think it was seeing leadership right across the school. We've obviously, as I said earlier, the middle leaders are and teachers are chairing the action groups that we created in order to make sure that we've got ownership right across the school. Our departmental self-evaluation meetings this year have focused on obviously looking at how each department is addressing the inspection action plan. We've reviewed the job descriptions for the pastoral team. We've developed the roles of TAs and given them increased recognition. And the elenco now runs, a sort of a CPD training event once every week in order to make sure that the TAs also feel valued in terms of what they are doing, because they've been a massive support for us as a school as well, and given them specific responsibilities. Already mentioned about ASD, for instance. So there's TAs with specific responsibilities now rather than being generic in terms of their role. We've also created for Curriculum for Wales, and I'm sure you may mention Curriculum for Wales a little bit later on, we've appointed or seconded 2 members of staff for a 0.4, in other words, 2 days a week, where their sole job is to focus on preparing the school for Curriculum for Wales. So they've got no teaching commitment for 2 days a week. We interviewed for one. We found we had 2 staff who were particularly strong, and we took the decision to appoint them both, and it's been really effective for them to bounce ideas and give them extra confidence working together as well, and that's been really good. They've worked with an ERU curriculum team who have provided some excellent training, to be honest, and support through Anna Bolt when she was working with ERU. Just a couple of other things then. Obviously, the extended leadership.
Yeah, if you could sort of bring these to a close now, we won't get any time for questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just say then, obviously, we appointed 2 temporary assistant head teachers for September. Their new roles are there. We obviously, Sam Williams, SLW there is the new assistant head teacher. So we had quite a change in terms of roles. And also, I think it's important to say that the roles of the staff of the leadership team align and completely, not only with the Estin recommendations, which is sort of secondary really, what they do align with is our school priorities, and that's been really important moving forward as well. And it's added significant capacity for us to move the school forward as a leadership team as well. I won't go through this. I think this is just some of the things there. And just to talk about R5, which is about standards and progress, I think the one thing I would say is that the recommendations from Estin do overlap. There's a significant overlap, certainly between things like, for instance, R1, which is about teaching and assessment, and then obviously standards and progress. And I think we felt that if we could get R1 right, then it would not be naturally improve R5, but it would make a massive difference in terms of our progress against R5. So, for instance, we obviously made sure that I think that if the teaching and assessment is right, then obviously that's going to have a massive effect in terms of standards and progress in lessons. So we've got strategies in terms of book looks, department reviews, observations, pupil voice, etc., which we've already talked about. Obviously that affected what we did. That was influenced greatly because I've got no grades to show you other than the centre assessed grades for 2020, and obviously the centre determined grades that we produced for 2021. What I would say, and I've got no qualms in saying that the grades that our children had for the centre assessed grades and the determined grades for last summer were very, very fair. They were very accurate, and we made no attempt to inflate grades or give children grades that they didn't deserve. And I think that's something that we're proud of as a school. I think we were very, very robust in how we addressed CDGs. We had no issues when our centre policy was submitted and accepted by the WJC without any amendments. We produced detailed subject assessment plans. We interviewed the children after they got their grades. We only had 9 requests for decision-making records, and we only had 2 appeals, one of which was a sixth former who was taught up in Bishop Vaughan, neither of which were overturned, and the grades stayed as they are. So I would say that the grades produced for Morriston are a very fair reflection of those year groups, and I think would have been very, very similar to the grades those children would have had during a normal year as well. And I think that's important that I say that really. And I'll stop there because I know you've got any questions.
Thank you very much. Do you want to unshare your screen so you can sort of get? Gosh, thanks.
I'm sorry to take so long. It's just about there was so much for us to tell you about the last 18 months, really, in terms of where we've moved the school. No,
I appreciate that. It's been a very challenging year with COVID as well, and lockdowns, and obviously we're keen to tell us what obviously what you've been doing.
Thank you,
Michelle. Can you sort the screen out? I don't know.
See if I can.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just go and turn my light on again? I'm sorry, it's up in the dark here a second.
Yeah. Right, we've got a number of questions. Some of them have been answered actually. Could I Mike, you've got your hand up first if you want to come in, but we've got a set of questions that we've set.
Do you want to go through those first, Chair?
Okay, yeah, fine. But what I was going to say was one or two of them Martin has already answered. So like the first one, how has the school responded to the Eston inspection? Well, I think we've covered that. But how is the school addressing the implementation of the new curriculum and the national mission for education?
Okay, a number of things really. I think we have been working against the new curriculum, for about the last 3 or 4 years. We've done a fair amount of work with our local, our cluster schools, both in terms of running inset days for, sorry, the screen's disappeared, there we are. We've run inset days with our cluster schools. We've run sessions that we involved Aero, etc. But I think what we did feel that we weren't making fast enough progress. I think certainly obviously COVID and lockdowns, etc. did have an adverse effect on our progress. And I think in conjunction with Nigel, I think we both agreed that we needed to move the agenda forward at a quicker rate. That's why we decided to appoint 2 what we've called, originally they were Curriculum for Wales champions, they're now Curriculum for Wales lead practitioners, and they have really influenced us moving forward in terms of how we're planning for Curriculum for Wales. They were tasked really with developing a Morriston vision for Curriculum for Wales, and I think that's important as well, that this is something that is going to be specific for Morriston. It's going to involve the local community, it's going to be local, it's going to be applicable to our children as well, and I think that's really important. That group initially worked with Anna Bolt, again with the Aero curriculum team, and I've got to say Anna was excellent in supporting those members of staff moving forward as well. We've used things like, for instance, Sam Williams, who's been appointed as assistant head, he's now overseeing Curriculum for Wales. His doctorate, which he received about a month ago, is, and it's not the reason we appointed him, but it's helpful. His doctorate, I think, is co-constructing relevant curriculum change and reimagining the 4 core purposes. So we feel he's got some real expertise to bring to the table as well. He is working and line managing those lead practitioners, and it's put us in a really strong position. We've not gone down the road of creating AOLEs, areas of learning experience, but what we have done is we've grouped our departments under AOLEs, and they are working collaboratively with the lead practitioners in order to prepare us for Curriculum for Wales for moving forward. And our plan is that we'll have a pilot implementation this summer with a partial implementation for September 2022, and then full implementation for the whole of Key Stage 3 by 2023. And that's what Sam is aiming at, moving us forward, really.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions to put to Martin on the curriculum? Because I can see both Al and Mike have got their hands up. Okay, I'll just run through these questions. How have you improved the quality of teaching? I think you've actually you've answered that question. A lot of them you will have. What are the barriers to the school improving its learner outcomes, including any challenges they are experiencing in implementing the new curriculum? And I think you've answered that as well. How are the teaching staff engaging with the teaching and learning requirements including developing their own professional learning? And I think you've answered that as well. But what is the school doing to improve levels of pupil attendance and to minimise exclusions? If you mentioned it, but if you could sort of highlight that a bit.
I will, yeah. Okay, obviously in terms of attendance, it's difficult for us to comment because of COVID and lockdowns in terms of percentages. We've made significant improvements, I think, in terms of our attendance up to lockdown. I think we were around about 89%. Leading up to when I took over, we were then up, into the top quartile, into the low 90s and things of our attendance, which was in a much more positive place. Certainly in terms of where we are now, as I said, our attendance is running at about 86.1%. That, I think, is sort of pretty much where most other schools in Swansea are. We've obviously been hit quite heavily in terms of COVID, and also September, where we hoped that we would be coming into some sort of coming out of the woods a little bit. Actually, we've had far greater cases of COVID and linked sort of illnesses, etc., which has influenced that. And I think at the moment, I think on the document I sent you, I think we're running about 2.6% of our children testing positive. That's now up to 3.6%. So it's getting very close to the 5%. I think that is identified by the county as being the sort of pinch point, really. So I think we've done a lot, and I think some of the things I've already mentioned in terms of what we're doing in terms of attendance, in terms of the well-being support that we put into place, things like the family engagement, things like using MILE, our alternative provision for our hard-to-reach learners, etc. Also our positive behaviour management programmes I've already talked about. All these things I think will and are having a positive effect on attendance, although it's not a positive effect at the moment. I can't give you in terms of a percentage compared to 2 years ago, because obviously the situation is very different at the moment. But certainly in terms of engaging with some of our hard to reach children, our more high tariff children, I think it's definitely having an effect in terms of that as well. I think it's something we were quite strong with anyway, but I think the fact we've been able to put additional support in and additional capacity in terms of staffing has made a big difference as well. And I think that will make a difference moving forward as well.
Great, thanks. Again, quite a what are the governing bodies' priorities and how are they being addressed? Perhaps, Alison and Martin, you may want to answer that together.
Yeah,
I've been a governor at Morriston Comp since 2010, but in the last 2 to 3 years, the governing body has changed radically. A few of our older members decided to retire from governing body duties, so we've got quite a new governing body. So our main priority, apart from supporting and challenging the school, what we've done, we've assigned groups of governors to the 5 recommendations in the PAP, and we've also got a 6th group that's assigned to Curriculum for Wales. So those are our main priorities at the moment. There's been a bit of a challenge though, because we haven't been able to get into school to attend these meetings face to face. We've still met on Teams as much as possible. So our main priority really as the governing body is to make sure that we are completely aware, updated, totally understanding of everything that the school is doing. Every half term we have a very detailed head teacher report, similar to what Martin's given tonight, so we know exactly what's going on. We've been absolutely delighted with the progress that's been made, to be honest with you. There was a lot of progress being made before Weston, but the progress has been made since, and particularly with the ready to learn approach and looking at supporting the families more and sort of the pastoral sides of the school, so that children who otherwise wouldn't be accessing the curriculum in the way they could be and achieving, their needs are being met. So, so the priority of the governing body really is to just be, entirely aware of what's going on and contribute as much as possible, ask challenging questions, and be involved in the AIB meetings so that we know, that we are really up to date with everything. We have been encouraged to attend learning walks. I know a couple of us did prior to lockdown, but it's not easy. Like I said, it's not easy to get into school at the moment, but in the future that will continue as well, because we also want to feel, for the staff and the pupils, to feel that we really are part of the school community and that we really do care about what's happening and so on.
Great, thank you very much. The last question then, and then open to comments from members. How well have you been supported by the local authority and the school improvement service?
Yeah, I'll answer this. I'm sure Alison may say something as well. Really, I would say that first of all, I think our main port of call has been Nigel as our school improvement advisor. Just the fact, the amount of support that he's given has been excellent. And I think more importantly, he's really challenged the school. I think we can safely say that our AIB meetings, they're not just, just to tick a box. He really provides challenge, really sort of positive, but, really sort of demanding way. And I think that's exactly what we needed moving forward as well. I feel Nigel's got a really good grasp of what Morriston is and what we're about. And really, I think his work has been really first class, really, in terms of what we've done in terms of that. And that's the one thing. I don't know what the plans are moving forward, but from a school point of view, we would really ask really that the local authority consider the fact that how important it is that that level of consistency, because I think having someone who knows the school, that you haven't got to go back to zero and start all over again is been massively important for us moving forward. As I said, those AIB meetings, in our revisit with Eston in early December, is something that we would like to continue every half term, because it really does hold us to account. And I know he reports to Helen and Rob Davis as well, and I know that's important. But from our point of view, it's been hugely helpful in terms of moving us forward. And also, I know he's keen to broker us, school to school support as well, and links with other other areas where we can get some support. And also about, I think something that we're not good at in Morriston, to be perfectly honest, is actually selling ourselves as well. And I know he's keen that actually there's a lot of good things going on, and perhaps we need to do a bit more of that, which we're not great at, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, thank you very much. Alison, would you like to add anything, or are you okay with that?
I'm quite happy with Martin's comment, yes.
Great, we've got a few hands up, and Mike's hand has been up for a long time. Mike, Councillor Mike Day.
Thank you. Yeah, my hand's getting a bit aching at the minute, but anyway, thank you, Martin. I think we've all been very impressed with the range of actions that have been taken, and I'm sure that from your point of view and from Alison's point of view, you'd understand that our role as a scrutiny committee is not to kind of look for things that are going wrong, but what we want to see is improvement as much as anybody else does, both in terms of the individual school and also in terms of education service generally. So it's looking at the kind of the lessons that we might be able to learn from it. And I suppose you've enumerated a very wide range of actions that have been taken. And one of the things that I would be keen to know is what the impact of those actions are. So it would be a question of maybe just trying to narrow it down in terms of what would be the headlines, what would be the three main points that you would be able to point to as evidence of the improvements that are being undertaken in the school, and what would be your aim, let's say, for the end of the academic year in terms of where would you like the school to be from that perspective? We all appreciate, I think, that the circumstances in which you and the school and all other schools have been operating are very, very different. And, it's obviously been extremely difficult for you to be in a position of implementing a lot of the things that you'd want to change. But those would be, my main concern is kind of what three things can you point to as evidence of the positive action that you've been taking to improve and to address the recommendations that were put forward by Estin?
Yeah, I think some of the main things really were about consistency. I think where we were picked up really was that there was a lack of consistency in some areas. You know, they were seeing things, really good things in one area, but they were seeing less evidence elsewhere. And I think the system, the sort of strategies that we put into place have ensured that we are more consistent in terms of teaching and learning, in terms of our approach to skills, more consistent in terms of standards as well, in terms of monitoring our standards, in terms of also rigor and challenge. I think that is something that we have really focused on, is how we can build more rigor and more challenge into what we're doing with all our children as well. I think that's been really important. And again, I hope that has come through this evening, about the fact that we want to challenge not only our children but also our staff as well. And I think that's really important moving forward. And I just feel as a school we're in a far better position. I think it has given us the opportunity to sort of step off the wheel a little bit and actually look at ourselves. And I think that has been something that we've done, and we've been quite hard on ourselves really, in terms of analysing what we're good at, but also where we felt that we really needed to improve. And I think what we've done is we're now addressing. I think we've got all the pieces in place that address the priorities of the school, and I think that is where we're coming from, both in terms of providing capacity in terms of staff, but also in terms of roles and responsibilities as well. And I think we've looked at the whole approach really, in terms of how we're going to move the school forward. We've tried not to look for sort of sticking plasters to try and improve this, or we'll put that in there, this in there. We've actually looked at the whole system that we had, you know, that we'd run. We've identified what was fit for purpose, and I think we've moved forward in terms of that. And I think that's the things that has really moved the school forward. And I think the last thing, along with consistency and rigor, would be about how we're looking to develop our attitudes to learning, in terms of putting those systems in place to support all our learners as well. I think it's something we've always been good at, but I think it's something that we, moving forward, will be particularly good at, is how we are catering and challenging all our learners. And also the support that we're putting in place. I think we are a community school. We are bang in the middle of the catchment. You know, all our children, or most of our children, walk home. You know, and we want to be a more effective centre of the community. And I think that's something else that we're looking to do in terms of our attitudes to learning work. You know.
Okay, yeah. I suppose the question in my mind is that you mentioned that those features are moving the school forward. How do you know the school is moving forward? What are the kind of the measures? Not necessarily for discussion now, but I think that's an important point, isn't it, for all of us, is to, you know, how those particular actions are actually making a difference as far as the school is concerned.
Yeah, I think we've, you know, I think, as I said at the outset, really, I think it's important that we measure the impact, and we've been keen to show that as well, despite lockdown, despite you know, all the challenges related to that. I think we've parked that a little bit, and I think we've made sure at our AIB meetings that we're showing not only that we're doing, you know, you can do 100 things, can't you, and it doesn't have any effect. I think it's what we've tried to do is to show through pupil voice, through contact with parents, through work with departments, etc., actually what the impact of our strategies have been as well. And I think, yes, there are some limitations. Yeah, we haven't been able to do as many things like lesson observations perhaps as we would normally do in a normal year, etc. But I think we've done other things that have demonstrated impact, and I would be confident that Estin and, you know, yourselves as leaders in the authority would be able to see that we've actually made some impact, and these things have had impact on learning and progress in school as well. They're not things we've just done just to, you know, look good in a document. I think we've been able to demonstrate throughout the year, and I hope the authority would back me up on that, that we've demonstrated impact of the things we've put into place as well.
Thank you, Martin. Al has had his hand up nearly as long as Mike. Al.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just conscious that some other hands went up while that question was being asked. I didn't know whether or not anyone else wanted to come in on that point, but I'm happy to go forward for it otherwise.
Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Al, yeah.
Well, it's really, yeah, a question for the Directorate, to be honest, in terms of lessons learned, as Mike has just been talking about this. What lessons have we learned through Martin's own words, the level of scrutiny and challenge that he's enjoyed, and I'll use that word in a qualified sense, since the Ested inspection, has had a transformational effect on the school. How confident are we at the Directorate level that this level of challenge to schools is taking place across the county to avoid any damning Estin reports, to be honest? So.
Thank you, Al. And the next hand up is, of course, Helen Morgan-Rees, our director. So perhaps, Helen, you'd like to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just make it clear, this was not a damning Estin report. This was a report in a point of time when Morriston needed to strengthen its provision. It had already made improvements. I had the privilege of working with the school when it was really categorised as a red school back in 2014, and I've worked with Martin as part of Schools Challenge Cymru. I've worked with the school historically to see really what was needed to go on that improvement journey, although Martin doesn't want to call it a journey, but I could see there was clear progression. So at the point of 2020, when Estin did come, it's important to point out that they made 5 recommendations indicating clearly that things needed to be strengthened further. This was not a statutory category of follow-up. This was an informal category of follow-up, and it clearly indicated that Morriston Comprehensive needed more time, really, given the overlay of the staff changes that occurred in 2018, as Martin clearly pointed out, that it needed more time to bed in the new senior leaders at the school. And I think that's been achieved. And what I would say is thank you to Team Morriston, because Martin and Alison, you've obviously made vast improvements since the time I was closely attached to the school. And I can see as director from the monitoring reports that I've received, I can see that you've really come a long way, and I'm grateful for those reports. I have been watching you from a distance, and I look forward really to the next opportunity to meet with Estin next month. I know that Martin, you'll be meeting with them, and I'll be meeting with them, and as well Nigel as the challenge advisor. Absolutely important that we have a school improvement advisor who is a peer head teacher, somebody who has sat in the seat, who understands what it's like to run a secondary school of this nature. So I'm really grateful and thankful for Nigel's involvement and support and challenge to the school. And I think, as Councillor Day said, the difference made to children is what counts in the end. So I think the comparison between pre-COVID or pre-Estin 2020 and now is discernible. And I think Martin will be able to articulate that clearly to colleagues from Estin. He's already articulated it clearly here tonight in Scrutiny, and also through several monitoring reports. So I think the impact will be clear. The before and after effect on Morriston's pupils is there undoubtedly, and I think we'll be able to articulate that clearly. I think the overlay of the pandemic has been a significant factor, but it doesn't seem to have impeded Martin and his team, and that's really important, because the pandemic could have scuppered all efforts on this progression front. But Martin has clearly been able to overcome the huge challenges thrown by the pandemic and still keep momentum with his plan of action. So I commend you for that, Martin. And also, I would just say that I am particularly impressed really with the rigour and methodology of school improvement. You've obviously involved your staff, you've consulted and engaged with your staff to make sure there's ownership of the plan. And I think that's a real key feature of your success. So diolch yn fawr, Martin. Thank you very much.
Okay, Helen, much appreciated.
Thank you, Helen. Excuse me. Councillor Robert Smith, Cabinet Member, like to come in next before
Yeah, if I can, Chair, and just echo what Helen has said, because I think what we've had this afternoon is a very detailed presentation of what's been going on in Morriston. And it's quite clear, this is not a cosmetic exercise going after quick fixes. This is a much deeper level of engagement with the issues confronting the school, involving the different, involving all staff in the school. I'm taking the community forward, and it's extremely impressive to see the work that's been done, and my congratulations to you and to the school as a whole. And thanks as well.
Thank you, Robert. Can't hear you, Sue.
I am unmuted, sorry.
You're okay. You're okay. There we are.
Can I just thank, as everybody else is, Martin, for his detailed report. And it's been a huge amount of work, and I do appreciate that. But I just wondered about the well-being of the staff during this time and what you're doing to actually ensure that they are looked after, because they're a very important part of this plan for the forward. Yes?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first of all, we've tried to support our staff all the way through, the lockdown process. I think I mentioned about that we, curtailed all our meetings and things in order to focus on when we came back in terms of the, centre determined grades, etc. So we parked everything really in terms of that, and we've tried to strip off as much of the things that we felt weren't important in order for staff to focus on just the basic points about improving and doing the actual teaching and learning that's going on in the classroom. And I think that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to do some other things as well. We created our own fitness hub there, which opens in the morning and after school for all the staff. We've tried to give staff time back when we can do in non-contact time in order to reduce the amount of the pressures on them as well. We've supported staff. We have had high levels of absences this term particularly because of COVID, to be perfectly honest. But we've also supported staff in terms of childcare issues, in terms of having to look after their own children if they were their children were sent home from school when we were in bubbles, etc. And also if they contracted COVID and so on. So we've tried to support our staff 100% really as much as we can in terms of that. And we've done lots of things which are small little things, but we think are important to try and just encourage our staff. And I probably more importantly as well is in terms of the support we've given them in terms of training as well, because it was a massive learning curve for staff. When say we had about 3 days before we went into lockdown. Some staff are very au fait about using Teams and teaching online, etc. But most of them weren't. Most of them were absolutely scared about the thought of, my goodness, what's this going to look like? How is it going to work? Whatever. I can't do this. I can't even do that. And I think we, in an incremental way, try to support our staff through that as well. And I think that's important. So you can do all the nice little things. You can send them, we sent them gifts, we sent them cards and things like this as well. Just little things which made a difference. But I think probably the most important thing is the support that we put in place for the staff in making sure that their well-being was protected, because there was a lot of talk about the well-being of the children, which is absolutely vital, but I think it's about the well-being of our staff as well. And it's work in progress, to be honest. We've got some staff who are still being heavily affected by things, others less so, and I think it's understanding that as well. They are the same as when we talk about people in the community or children. It's staff are equally important as well. So yeah, I think we have done a lot. We can always do more, and we're always willing to adapt and reflect on things and other pick up other ideas that we can support our staff with. But I think certainly more importantly is probably the support we tried to put in place, which I hope we did, in order to support staff, because the learning curve for many colleagues was massive.
Thank you, Martin. And also, can I just say, you have to look after yourself as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to Martin or Alison? No. Could I say a big thank you to you both? When you talked, Martin, about your report and so on, you know, it's not just the report, it's all the hard work that has gone in to actually make that happen. And you have made quite a difference over the last, what must be the most difficult 18 months, 2 years that we probably had in education. So, you know, really well done, and thank your staff as well, because they've all been part of that journey. So thank you both very much for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you, much appreciated.
The next item on the agenda is the work programme. And our next meeting is on the 9th of December. Has anybody got any comments?
Lyndon, can I just say that we've added one item, which is an update on the new regional partnership, which I think is going to, or went to Cabinet today. So Helen's going to come along and give you a verbal update of where we are with that.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? If not, could I thank you all, particularly Helen and Robert, for taking the time out of a busy work schedule to join us, and see you all soon. And I could say have a safe journey home, but some of us haven't got very far to go. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.